It is now my absolute pleasure and honor to invite Steve Bergen up to the pulpit to deliver this morning's Dvar Torah.
Good morning, Shabbat Shalom. First of all, I'd like to thank Rabbi Cohen for calling me this week and for this honor and his guidance in helping me prepare for this Dvar Torah. Thank you. He asked me if I wanted to practice this Dvar Torah yesterday from the Bima just to become more comfortable. Some of you know I am a dentist. So I said to Rabbi Cohen, I would just imagine that this entire congregation is filled with dentists, dental students, and dental residents, and then I'll be much more comfortable giving this drash. It's entitled, What Do You See When You Look Into a Mirror? And this Dvar Torah is based on a question of reflection, looking at Rockwell and Moses. I have about 10 minutes to tell you a story, actually to share a story with you. Some people tell stories using words, like Rabbi Cohen. Some people tell stories with song, like our two cantors, Sharon and Perry. And some people, like last month, Emily, told a story through Simon and Garfunkel's Sound of Silence, the power of silence. And Paul told a story on the mystery of symbols. And some people, like Norman Rockwell, tell stories through pictures. Norman Rockwell was a beloved and celebrated American illustrator, an artist famous for capturing what was termed the American experience. He saw life through art, the story of America in pictures. Norman Rockwell is most famous for painting 323 covers for the Saturday Evening Post. I am certain there are congregants here who absolutely remember that magazine. Yes, a few here and there. Yeah. However, I am not sure that you all are aware that this Saturday Evening Post still exists as a bi-monthly magazine. And for the yearly $15 subscription cost, you get access to the entire archive, all the magazines, the articles from when it was first published back in the August of 1821. My partner Sarah reminded me that was before the Civil War. It is fun to read what was on people's minds over these 200 years, and it's even more fun to see what they were advertising over those 200 years. This may seem like an advertisement for the Saturday Evening Post, but I get no benefit, only joy from telling you about it. But I digress. Rockwell's 323 covers are but a fraction of what he has created. Perhaps he is most famous for the four freedoms he painted. He painted those four freedoms that Franklin Delano Roosevelt spoke about in 1943 to stir up financial and emotional support for the war effort. The freedom of speech, the freedom from want, the freedom from fear, and of course, the freedom of worship. That is what was at stake, and that was what we were fighting for in World War II. Perhaps he was most famous for the Do Unto Others, or better known as the Golden Rule painting. Could it possibly have been his numerous advertisements? Later in his life, he drew pictures of the problems in our society: segregation, racism, war, distrust, and certainly portraits of famous individuals, both living and not. Or maybe it was the hundreds of everyday feel-good paintings of life in America, and so optimistic, your friends, your neighbors, your pets, the Boy Scouts, your neighborhood, children staring at the moon, or young couples sitting on top of the world. Overall, he painted or drew almost 4,000 illustrations, or I would say in a broad way, pieces of art. It clearly reflected our times. One of his most important paintings was entitled The Triple Self-Portrait, as you see here in front of you. It is what got me fascinated and interested in Rockwell in the first place, that you can look in a mirror and see something new every time. And you wake up in the morning, you look in the mirror, and you thank God every day for another glorious day, just like today. He is seen seated, number one. 2, looking into a mirror with opaque glasses, with a true reflection of himself. And 3, a canvas on an easel where the portrait he is painting of himself, arguably as he wishes to be seen at that moment in time. Perhaps a little younger, maybe a little wiser, or maybe more talented. Like some of his heroes whose portraits were tacked onto that canvas: Rembrandt, Pablo Picasso, Albrecht Dürer, and Vincent van Gogh, as you see in the upper right-hand corner. Painting a picture with opaque glasses could have several meanings. We don't want to see what we already know, or perhaps we just want a fresh start for the future we hope to have. Or as it was once said, we want to see life through rose-colored glasses. As you know, I am a dentist. I use these small mirrors in my work. It reflects far more than you might imagine. I've learned that even the smallest of mirrors can reveal a great deal. So now that I have presented a microcapsule of Norman Rockwell, what does all of his work, or even one of his works, have to do with today's Parsha and Deuteronomy? Moses, throughout Deuteronomy, reflects upon his life much like Rockwell reflected on our lives. His strengths, his flaws, and his failings. Each Parsha is essentially a book or series of sermons recounting his life. While reflecting upon his time and life in Egypt and the subsequent banishment to the desert, Moses discovers his mission to lead his people out of slavery and pass through that desert with all its trials and hardships, as we were reading today. Moses clearly reflects on the lack of confidence he had in himself to fulfill that role. Moses displayed strength in crossing the Red Sea, leading hundreds of men, women, and children out of Egypt. Moses eventually receives the 10 Commandments on 2 stone tablets from a God he could not see, but only hear, Shema. Moses then, out of anger, destroys those tablets over the sin of the golden calf. He also reflects over that incident in Korach, in Numbers, as we read last month. He certainly reflects over God and his commandments, which he reviews in Deuteronomy, as we read last week. One of the biggest lessons we learn here is that God is a forgiving God by giving us the second set of tablets. But God is not a visual God. The Greeks, Romans, and Western cultures are filled with architecture, fine art, sculpture, devoted to the image of God. To Moses, it was recounted that would all be idolatry. Judaism has faith in a God we cannot see, we cannot even visualize. Once in a discussion with Cantor Shana Postman of TNV Synagogue in New York, she said she sees God not as a human image, but God's reflection, and God's reflection is not gender-based. God is beyond our human understanding. I thought perhaps it's that nebulous cloud that we talk about, and that he's protecting us like he does protect us with a mezuzah. Rockwell never painted an image of God. Only images of real people trying to obey God and live with his laws, which is a key element in this parsha and in Deuteronomy. To hear, Shema, it is a theme, right? And to listen and to obey God's commandments. I believe that is what Moses was continually reflecting upon at the end of his life. According to the rabbis in the Talmud, Moses even kept both tablets, the broken pieces of the first set of stone tablets, as well as the second complete whole set in the tablets. And these were kept in the Ark of the Covenant, made from acacia wood, just to remind him constantly to reflect on both the brokenness of his past, but also to focus on creating a more complete future for the people of Israel. Perhaps Moses didn't have a mirror made of glass, and not even rose or opaque glasses, since he clearly seemed to see the life he led, the land he could not enter, and the generations that would become a great nation, a land of fig trees, pomegranates, olive oil, and honey, as my granddaughter Sophia just read in the Torah. How about us? Now, if we were looking into a mirror, large or small, what would we see? And reflecting on a life of our own. Would you you use clear glasses or opaque glasses? How would you paint yourself? Would you be younger, as Rockwell did in this painting, in this portrait, or maybe older, wiser, kinder, more generous? Should we paint a picture of ourselves as to how we would want to be remembered? Or for what mitzvot we've done, or maybe even our regrets? However, ultimately, rather than the words, songs, or silence, it is our actions or pictures we paint that most accurately reflect our true selves, and that might be the most important. Perhaps the idea of painting a self-portrait helps us discover our own identity. And who are the heroes in our lives that we should honor, as Rockwell did on his easel of life? Are they religious figures that we read about each week, or perhaps our parents, our teachers, our siblings, our colleagues, friends, and yes, even our children and grandchildren? Does the Torah help us find our innermost self, or a guide to finding the best of ourselves? Does the portrait we paint on canvas reflect the life that we've led? Illustrators like Rockwell shape society and advance social good. Judaism has the same goals, especially since this week's Parsha focuses on the relationship between God, Moses, and Israel, and it is based upon mutual love. That is something for all of us to reflect upon. Shabbat Shalom. Thank you, and Amen. No, I'll move it to back. I'm going to bring this to the Kiddush if any of you want to take a closer look at this portrait.
Thank you, and Yasher Koach to Steve. That was so, so beautiful and so powerful. I saw Steve wearing a Norman Rockwell tie several months ago, and I said to him, I'm sure you don't remember this, but a couple of years ago I gave a sermon on the Four Freedoms, Rockwell's Four Freedoms paintings, and spoke about them in relation to the four freedoms of the Haggadah, or the four expressions of redemption that the Haggadah references, which of course is the basis for why we drink 4 cups of wine at the Seder. And I think he did remember the sermon, and he told me how much he loves Rockwell. And I don't think Debbie Feinberg's here, but maybe that'll be a good trip for Debbie's new Trips and Treks group, where we can head up to the Norman Rockwell Museum. But that was absolutely beautiful, and I I do want to share. Steve and Sarah gave me an amazing print of Rockwell's Freedom of Religion painting that I'm going to hang up in my office. So Toda Rabah, thank you so much for that, and what a beautiful Dvar Torah, and thank you for sharing such a beautiful talk with us this morning. We turn to